who is the author of several poetry books. Chiefly among them today is The Earth's Dance of Wind and Fire. And so we invite him to the stage today to discuss his book and enlighten us on many different topics. So please welcome William Thomas. Before we get started, I just want to announce some upcoming events that are going to be happening at Sankofa. We do many events like this one and others. So you can definitely check out our website, sankofa.com, to get the full list and full description. But tomorrow we have a poetry write-up with a world-renowned, award-winning poet named Laini Mataka, and she is local in DC. And the event is called Reparations of a Different Sort. And so what it is a workshop that's going to be held in our conference room that we have inside the building, where people can come and actually work on their poetry, listen to each other's poetry, and actually get coached by someone who has over 50 years of Pan-African revolutionary poetry. So definitely you want to check that out. And then coming up early next week, actually coming up also tomorrow, Saturday, July 26th, but this is going to be here in the bookstore, another book event called No Cop, No City, No Cop City, No Cop World, Lessons from the Movement by Kamal Franklin. So that's not me. My name is Kamal Malik, so not Kamal Franklin, but this is a good brother and my namesake. So I think you guys should come and check this one out. I heard he's a brilliant brother. People are like really signing up for that event. So if you want to learn about being on the front lines against police brutality, reforming the police, or abolishing whatever, aspect you want to get into, that's what it's going to be tomorrow. And on Sunday, we got a jam-packed weekend. On Sunday, we have a series called Haiti on Our Mind. And it's part of our On Our Mind series, which features Sudan, Congo, and Gaza as well. And these happen every 2 weeks, and this is Haiti's turn. So we really wanted to call all DMV artists to sign up and sing their song of solidarity with Haiti. The On Our Mind series is visioned as artists expressing their art in solidarity with these endemic tragedies and these wars and things that are going on in our world. So bringing the artists and the activism together, right? Which is like Artivism, which on every Tuesday we have a jam session hosted by a group called Artivism. So if you play music and you sing, rap, do poetry, you should come out on Tuesdays at 8 and jam with the Artivism crew. Monday, we actually have an event called Draw Your Name in Amharic, and this has been happening every week also. So there's a master painter who teaches you how to, draw your name out using the Ethiopian and the Ge'ez alphabet, right? So many other events that we have throughout the week. Definitely check the website. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention our most popular event. It's an annual event that we do every year. It's pretty much like a festival that we do in the front of Sankofa and inside here and in the back, and it's called Watermelon Day. And it's a very family-friendly day. So we celebrate all things red, black, and green, and like the colors of the watermelon, including the black seeds, because we talk about seeded watermelon. So we use it as an opportunity. There's going to be storytellers, singers. I think there may be a fashion show, and there's going to be free watermelon all day. So it's like a lineup of all different type of artists, drummers, dancers, and it's creatives, and it's a very family-friendly day. So definitely it's one to like bring the kids out if you're looking for something for the family. So that's going to be on next Saturday, August 2nd, and that's going to be taking place from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. To 9 p.m. And earlier that day, you have an opportunity to join a kente cloth weaving workshop, which is on the same day as Watermelon Day, but it's in the morning. It starts at 11, from 11 to 1. So you could go upstairs in the conference room, learn how to make some kente cloth, and then later down, you can come down and join the rest of the festivities. So it's kind of like, this is the third time we've done the kente cloth weaving workshop, and it's been a big hit. So we wanted to pair it up with Watermelon Day. Okay. So thank you for listening to the events. Check the website to get more of the events. And without further ado, I'm just going to speak briefly on tonight's book and our moderator as well as our author here. So bear with me. All right. I'm not going to read the whole bio, but I am going to read this blurb about the book. It's really beautifully written, and I think it'll give you insight into what we're going to go into today. So it says, "The Earth's Dance of Wind and Fire" by Dr. William N. Thomas IV invites readers into an elemental allegory where wind and fire, personified forces, engage in intimate dialogues about identity, connection, and transformation. Wind, embodying change, restlessness, and introspection, contrasts with fire's passionate intensity and craving for cohesion. Through their dynamic exchanges, simultaneously magnetic and tumultuous, this lyrical meditation explores growth, yearning, and the bittersweet acceptance that some powerful unions are destined to be brief. In beautifully poetic prose, Thomas explores the tension between independence and union, crafting a moving reflection on love, impermanence, and the elemental forces that shape the human spirit. So that was beautiful, and I'm excited to hear about these poems. So first of all, William N. Thomas IV, EDD, also known as Baba Happy Ma'at, joined the faculty at American University in 2021 as a professional lecturer in the School of Education program and currently serves as the program's director. Dr. Thomas's research interests focus on the application of self-determination theory through an African epistemological lens to better understand how marginalized stakeholders can gain equitable access, logical opportunities, and authentic empowerment in public schools and university settings. And he has a very long bio. So I'm going to just say the most important things to me is that this is my brother. This is my big brother from Morehouse. We both went to Morehouse, but him before me. So as fellow Morehouse man and my fellow Groove Fi Groove brother, right? We're in the same social fellowship. And he paved the way for me and all of us to join the Tiger Six Ma'at chapter at Morehouse, and where we essentially talked about all of the things that are on the shelves here and promoted that culture on campus. And so it's good to continue to do this and on a different level and build from those humble beginnings to where we are now. And it's a blessing to have him here. And he's also a master teacher, educator, and taught at very many schools in the DMV area, including Paul Public Charter School, Ron Brown, Roots Public Charter School, many others that he can tell you as well. And also just a brilliant brother, an artist, and a great person, a great spirit. And as you all can tell, and you guys are ready to really get in conversation with our good brother William. So also we have here someone who I don't know yet, but meeting today. We have Camille Nguyen Conyers, who is a proud Washington, D.C. native, as am I, so I appreciate that. All right, and a rising junior at American University, where she studies psychology and public health. Deeply committed to understanding and uplifting Black and Brown communities, Camille is passionate about creating spaces where people feel seen, heard, and valued. She is honored to moderate this important conversation in her hometown, a place where community history and healing powerfully intersect. Camille brings warmth, curiosity, and a reflective lens to the dialogue and looks forward to guiding a meaningful discussion around the book and its wider social impact. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Camille and Will, and they are going to have a great conversation, and you all are going to listen and then participate with Q&A afterwards. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming. We're going to start off by pouring libations to honor those ancestors who paved the way for us to be here. So I'm going to go over here to the dry plant So we begin in the tradition of honoring those who came before us. Tonight we remember the poets, our spirit griots, our keepers of rhythm and memory. We call upon the ancestral energy of Black women and Black men poets who laid the foundation for our voices. Phyllis Wheatley, Ashe. Langston Hughes, Ashe. Gwendolyn Brooks, Ashe. Paul Lawrence Dunbar, Ashe. Lucille Clifton, Ashe. Robert Hayden, Ashe. Sonia Sanchez, Ashe. Amiri Baraka, Ashe. Audrey Lord, Ashe. Etheridge Knight, Ashe. Maya Angelou, Ashe. Gil Scott Heron, Ashe. Derek Walcott, Ashe. And finally, Nikki Giovanni, Ashe. May their spirits dwell with us tonight as we celebrate poetic legacy, cosmic reflection, and cultural awakening. Ashe.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Sankofa Video Books and Cafe. My name is Olivia Afflew, and I am a rising junior at American University, and it is my honor to welcome you all to tonight's event, Poetry in the Particle, a celebration of poetry, metaphysics, memory, and meaning. We are gathered to reflect on the brilliant work of Dr. William N. Thomas IV, also known as Hapi Ma'at, a name that pays homage to the sacred Nile River deity and the cosmic balance of truth and harmony. To open our space, I offer a poem that has long served as a river of remembrance for our people, Langston Hughes' The Negro Speaks of Rivers. The Negro Speaks of Rivers by Langston Hughes. I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. With this offering, may we be rooted in the depths of our shared ancestry and flow forward with purpose. Now, I'm honored to introduce tonight's moderator. As mentioned, Camille Nguyen Conyers is a proud DC native and a rising junior at American University studying psychology and public health. Her passion lies in uplifting Black and Brown communities and creating spaces where people feel truly seen and heard. Please welcome Camille Nguyen Conyers.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Beautiful poem. So I want to start off by saying how I first met Dr. Thomas. It was actually at an event at my university that really allowed us to wind down outside of the classroom. The event broke barriers between professors and students, and it allowed me to get a glimpse at outside of the academicness. Like, I feel like professors, we often limit them to what they teach us and what they can offer academically, but he provided a lot of meaningful insights on just the career aspect of life. So I am happy to be here today to moderate. And I hope that tonight is just as transformative for you guys as the moment I met him was for me. Let's get started. Let's start at the beginning. I know your life has taken you through a lot of different spaces across different cultures, disciplines, and roles. Could you tell us a little bit about your story, your roots, and what brought you here today to talk about the intersection of poetry, education, and culture?
No, thank you so much, Camille, and thank you all so much for being here. Multiple individuals from various parts of my life, so 100% appreciative. I was someone who was raised on military bases in Hawaii and California and eventually moved to Texas. As you can see, I have a very diverse family. My mom's from the Philippines. My dad's family is from Panama. I come from a family of artists as well. We have curators, we have movie makers, we have Lego artists. We do all kinds of things. So I'm highly influenced by this artistic realm. My grandfather and grandmother, like I mentioned, came from Panama, went to historically black colleges in Texas, Wiley College and Bishop College. My grandmother's father, Milton Garvey, was the cousin of Marcus Garvey, and we were always made aware of that strong legacy that we have to uphold. My grandfather, William Thomas II, was the first black city councilman at the small town of Cleveland, Texas, and they recently recognized the William and Thomas Day there. But for me, I was someone who really hated school growing up. I really wanted to be in the NBA and had dreams of hopefully, them being a professional basketball player. But my dad told me to have a backup plan, and that backup plan was to do journalism. So I started writing for the school newspaper, which was the beginning of my writing career, and eventually ended up going to Morehouse College, where I wrote poetry. I worked very heavily with the Black Catholic Church there and was a ministry assistant. And just did a variety of aspects that eventually led me here to Washington D.C., where my wife Zoma Wallace is from, and ended up teaching at her former school, Roots Activity Learning Center, where I was really introduced and anchored in Afrocentricity in particular, and eventually ended up teaching in a variety of different schools, particularly charter schools here in Washington D.C. It was mentioned I taught at Paul Public Charter School. I was also a principal at a community academy public charter school. I see one of my former teachers here as well, which is a really, really great, Miss Hannah. I was a program director at Paul Public Charter School and took students around the country for their international studies program, and then also went to Philadelphia and was the director of their science program at Mastery Charter School. And so now, after finishing my doctorate, I'm working at American University in a doctoral program where I work with fabulous faculty, students. I got a chance to really interact with undergraduates lately. And so, now as you mentioned, like my research is really focused around motivation. I've developed an element that I call Sankofian action inquiry, which allows individuals to do a process that we call memory mining to better understand these personal memories and collective memories that can allow them to develop a certain level of what I call motivational awareness. And so I've developed these different terms throughout that time to really allow educators to be able to use an African epistemology, particularly sparking from these Adinkra symbols, to understand different elements of their environment and how their environment primes their motivation. So that's just a little bit about the research that I do, and I guess a little bit about me.
Wow, I love that. And I love how, despite all the different places and stages you've been in your life, it always seems to circle back to community and culture. Which I think is reflective in your writing and just how you talk and present yourself. So to go even further on your upbringing, how do you navigate between the artists that can be attributed to more free thinking compared to the more strategic, more planned out professor side of you?
Yeah, I think they influence one another. I think the artist side of me sometimes humbles me to make sure that I'm not staying too rigid in regards to structure. I'm somebody who heavily depends on structure. Anybody who's worked with me, I'm big about schedules. I'm big about organization and categorization. But I'm also big about, breaking boxes and making sure individuals are able to be their authentic self. And so sometimes it takes you to, have a sense of what I call rigorous flexibility, to have structure, but have the ability to be able to move outside that structure. So.
Nice. You talk about this flexibility. So maybe you can adapt or connect that to the Earth Dance of Wind and Fire. In the beginning of it starts to feel like the beginning of a relationship that's full of spark, curiosity, and sometimes even chaos. What would you say inspired this piece, and what were you hoping to represent about relationships and how we communicate and connect with one another?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the inspirations for me was, the stories from our ancestors, and particularly the stories in ancient Kemet, the wind god Shu. If anybody is familiar with the story, the wind god Shu had two children, Geb and Nut, and Geb and Nut were this inseparable. They would stay together, and they were just so in love with each other. And the god Atum asked Shu, the father, to separate he sent down to earth to, in essence, punish those individuals who weren't, upholding Ma'at. So I thought about the punishing element that sometimes love feels like, especially when you don't get it right, when individuals are trying to make sense of it amongst that distance. But also she was the goddess of healing. And so I thought about the healing nature of love and how those individuals and those entities could come together. I was also inspired by a book that I've been reading for a part of my self-care, which is called The Garden Within by Dr. Anita Phillips, who looks at the comparison and uses the garden as a metaphor for self-care, and particularly the seedling as something that is representative within the brain, particularly within the neuron. And so I started to build this garden within type of metaphor throughout some of the other books. But I was also inspired by a researcher by the name of Yolanda Seeley Ruiz, who created this process of what she calls the archaeology of self that allows individuals to develop and understand their racial literacy. And so when I found out that she was also writing poetry and doing her scholarly work, it inspired me to say, you know what, let me go ahead and take the risk and try to put some of my poetry out there simultaneously, doing some of that work. So, and then ultimately one of the things that really, inspired me is Nikki Giovanni. I've always wanted to be a poet, and the first person that was a character, an individual in my life that I knew as a poet was Nikki Giovanni. So those are some of the aspects that I guess inspired me with regard to the book.
Yeah, no, those inspirations seem to have really impacted the way you go forth about the different books and the characters and the different dialogues that are present in the book. And I definitely see the tension that you were talking about there's like this confusion and passion that's pushing and pulling these different characters. And I think it really is reflective of the different stages of connection that I sort of touched on a bit, and how you were talking about like the consequences of loving. And I think that is something that, I don't know, in a lot of the time in media, I hear people talk about love bombing. And I think that is like something that like seems so good in when you're actually in it, but then like how you were saying, the consequences of love. And I think that is one thing that I took from the book.
Yeah, I think there's like a negotiation and a navigation of love. And so like when I look at the different books, I kind of organize them within these different levels of how love impacts inspiration, how love impacts motivation, how love can be the foundation for one's aspiration, and then eventually giving them a certain level of orientation. But not just that, within the theory that I study within my work, self-determination theory, they look at motivation being regulated and managed in different ways. So you have what we call external regulation, where people are motivated either by punishment or reward. And so I started thinking about, well, how do people react to love as relates to punishment or reward? And same thing with regard to motivation in regards to introjected regulation. Are individuals motivated with love as it relates to feeding their ego or guilt? Or is it more identified, where they've identified a specific aspect of that person or that situation? So that was another way that some of the scholarly influences in my research started to influence some of the dynamics of the themes in the book.
Thank you. Your series breaks a lot of literary expectations, and I know that's difficult for me to say that literary expectations, because I feel like with a genre like poetry, there's so many boxes that just are forced to be like, you're forced to leave these boxes, because I think that might be I don't know if you've had trouble with that aspect of poetry versus your academic writing, but could you tell me a little bit more about the text message, visuals, and author notes, and even go as far to bring in like nostalgic technology in your writing? Could you tell us a little bit about that choice and approach that you went with?
Yeah, I kind of call it what I frame in their anti-aesthetic. So when you think about anti-aesthetic, it's kind of a term that I feel is more representative of what the authentic, terminology and expectation of aesthetic, because typically when we think of aesthetic, we think about beauty and elegance and so on. But in essence, the real true definition of aesthetic, I think, is more encapsulated within anti-aesthetic, which prioritizes concepts, which prioritizes emotions, commentary. And so when you look at how I kind of designed the book, I tried to incorporate, for example, this tension between this analog generation and this digital generation, and how we communicate through text messages, and whether or not we can actually communicate, authentically true love or true feelings through that means. I also kind of threw in there the Motorola two-way pager for my generation, who had that during the early 2000s as a way to kind of think about how folks were communicating even at that point. But more importantly, just really thinking about, this idea of transparency. And so one of the things that I did throughout all the books is put authors' analysis and having individuals understand some of the literary figurative language that I use specifically. And then another aspect of the anti-aesthetic was really using different characters to make sure that it wasn't one set visual of what these individuals look like. It kind of showed the evolving and elusive nature of these ideas, and particularly love, so that it doesn't necessarily encapsulate one visual image of a person. So that was some of the elements of like kind of the anti-aesthetic piece that I used to incorporate in there.
Oh, and I definitely feel like all of the things that you were saying while reading the book, I felt that. And reading it felt like a true representation of how people truly live and love. And it reminded us that relationships aren't always these perfect cookie cutter representations of what we typically see in media. So, and going back to the text messages, I felt like that was something that I really resonated with, considering I'm Gen Z. So like a lot of the way I communicate with people is through messages. So it was definitely the first time I've seen something like this, but it was something that I was like, wow, like I could see myself having these conversations myself. So.
Yeah, it's something about the ambiguity of these text messages. So like one of the things that is a huge theme in the book is this idea of communication and miscommunication when it comes to expression. And so if you look here at one of the first text message chains between Wind and Fire, it says, do you want to go somewhere? And Fire says, yes, where? But Wind says, I'm not sure. And then Fire says, the light can take you places that are foreign and confusing, which may bring frustration. And then Wind says, have patience. And Fire says, patience is easier said than done. And so it forces you to start to think about the ambiguity that we give in text messages and how much context you actually need when it comes to communicating. And obviously, I try to leave it into a place where we can start to understand or get a glimpse or almost feel like you're looking at somebody's phone and getting an insight of it. But indecision is a huge theme throughout the entire book as well, and how individuals navigate indecision amongst these very, very strong feelings.
Yeah, I definitely, to what you said about the ambiguity, because I feel like a lot of times text messages can be interpreted, even text messages that I receive, like they can be interpreted in so many different ways. And I think that's where a lot of miscommunication comes from, just because I think the book has a good way of showing both sides of the story as like a narrator view on it. But I feel like we still don't understand to the full truth of these conversations, because unless we take parts of our own lives that we can connect with, we don't know the full truth of these two characters and what they are going through. So I think that is really allows people to resonate with this book, because they can apply it to where it fits in their own lives.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I was writing it, I didn't write it initially as text messages, right? Like I just kind of wrote the poem and was kind of putting these ideas down. But as I started to look at the short phrases and how it was being used, I saw the poem being more resonating with me as a text message. Kind of as these exchanges, mirror in essence emotional tension, you know what I mean? And trying to bring out that tension within the actual text messages that struggle to connect, to protect, sometimes surrender in certain situations. But ultimately, as it says here, the story questions whether love can survive ambiguity and whether inspiration alone can sustain it, particularly that union. So We could read a certain, portion of it. If you want to read fire, I can read wind. But like I said, all of these are different dialogues. A lot of the times there are some personal reflections, but they're supposed to be dialogues between these two entities. So if you want to read fire, I'll read wind. Yeah.
Oh, is it starting?
Yep, make it start right here.
I heard something that I really like.
What is it?
You.
What did you hear?
Everything.
How?
Patience.
Do you like what you hear?
Yes.
Why?
Because it allows me to understand myself more.
So you listen to find yourself. So as you can see, like, it kind of goes back and forth where, you can start to see some of that indecision, but start to see some of the initiation and kind of longing that each individual is having or whatnot.
Yes, for sure. So yeah, I want to go deeper into the characters wind and fire. What are some key themes you hope readers take with them, especially in how we relate to one another, like whether it's connecting to certain elements or where if we see ourselves in this book?
Well, I know when we were talking prior to this, and you had mentioned this particular excerpt, you know what I mean, where as you were reading it, you started to kind of pull out these themes of just effort, how individuals give different effort to love, to relationships. But you also mentioned, which was interesting, the beauty of mystery, the unknown, as well as, being able to acknowledge difference within that process. So I know there was an exchange between two of them that you lifted up here. It said, I have yet to fully comprehend your heart's lyric, but I know we sing the same song. And then Fire says, I know not what will become of this newfound emotion known as you, but I hope you allow us to explore it explore it in a capacity that is comfortable for your reality. So it's that constant push and pull, trying to get people to get that other individual to be able to see the space that they are in.
Yeah, no, while reading the book, I feel like there was so many different emotions and feelings felt from both aspects of the story. Like it was like how you said, a constant push and pull to knowing that if they were to love each other, it would be very dangerous, but it doesn't change the fact that there's still that passion there. So I think the reason why this really stuck out to me, because it was even though they know that they're completely opposing, they come from two different places, they still are pushing for effort and pushing to feel something or to be able to meet at a middle ground. And I think that was really beautiful, and that's why it really stuck out to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll read another section from the book. I think that is one of my favorite parts, but it really lifts up this idea of distance, space, non-locality, and it's in one of the opening prologues in the second book. It's called the Windy Prologue, and so I'll go ahead and read this section here. So Wind says, I woke up this morning in eager anticipation of our interaction. My preconceived ideas about how I would respond consumed me from the moment I opened my eyes this morning to our final goodbye, expressed in limited vocabulary. While our unpredictable future bombards my thoughts, your calm beauty and strong internal personality allows me to focus on that which is priority. You're making me a better person for myself and others. I found myself wandering around today, hoping I would have that brief moment where I would witness you smile or laugh, or even better, say words that express emotions beyond the comprehension of our present state of being. I interact with many during the day, but you were the only one I was looking for. I wondered if you were looking for me too, as I attempted to present a mature exterior, but my internal energy was in constant motion and reminded me of those days in my youth where special people would create special feelings. My physical reflected spiritual, while my mental reflected unconditional. So as the day now begins, my eyes burn as they fight to see who they must, instead of seeing who they want. But physical light and the daily pull of gravity cannot discourage me from the possibilities of finding you in this lifetime. While I can't define what my role will be in your existence, please know that I do exist and that we have known one another before in a different time.
I think your use of, you mentioned feelings of burning in eyes. And I think that is so important that you are to notice that you used wind and fire. And I think it's so interesting because typically when we think about wind and fire, we think about wind blowing out fire. So it's how can we ever think of a world where these two things are like together. So I think that really just emphasized the like wanting to be together, but the struggling to make something that's healthy or like not damaging to both aspects. And that actually perfectly goes into my next question. From here on out, in the book, The Earth Song of Sun and or your sequel book, The Earth Song of Sun and Water, how do wind and fire evolve from one another to the next? Do we see a sense of heartbreak, or what is next for these two?
Yeah, I mean, the book, the Earth's Dance of Wind and Fire, it ends on heartbreak, obviously, and so one of the poems that's in the last section here is which I'll read here, is in the book 5, which is called "Windy Shame Among the Changing Same," and so it kind of sets the scene of how this really really fleeting, inspiring love kind of starts to dwell and almost change. So it says, "Seasons change, but it still feels cold. The fire is lost, but the wind is bold, and moves with grace in second place. No time to erase, he's lost the race. In case their hearts have sparks to spare, the fire will not meet the wind's despair. Visibly distant and invisibly consistent, wildfires burning, absence persistent. A heart grows fonder, or a heart goes and wanders. A change of reasons bring tragic treasons among wind and fire's changing seasons." And so you kind of start to see, with this kind of breakup, this understanding that wind and fire actually can't exist, that that fleeting dance that was taking place, that was happening during that moment, actually blew out, one's fire or stopped that wind. And so you even have wind writing this, email to fire, in essence, with the subject now saying, "Greetings become farewells, pleasantries become routine, feelings become buried, but then served on a guillotine." And so you see this, once again, this ending. But I think that when you get into, I wanted to show a short little video, that kind of gives in essence, kind of a preview of what this transformation that wind has into water, and understanding how now, you start to understand where motivation plays into this idea of love.
Narrative to waters reflect. In A Watery Welcome, the poetic prelude to the Earth's Song of Sun and Water, the author transitions from wind's vibrant narrative to water's reflective voice. This piece is a haunting dialogue between water and fire, using minimalistic diction and poignant imagery. The elements are personified as lovers separated by a metaphysical shift. The line, "just to wave at you," evokes both a gesture and water's movement, adding emotional depth. Emojis serve as visual metaphors, echoing the narrative's poetic structure. Wind, now water, flows through rivers and oceans, estranged from fire. This shift brings a sense of loss and yearning, redefining love and identity. The prelude introduces a quieter, introspective tone to the saga. Change, like wind to water, expands the elemental mythos into fluid emotional territory.
Just a little sense of the transition now, as you start to think about wind being free and influencing, and now being kind of secluded to this idea of water and interacting with how the sun impacts it. So as you kind of look at that, you kind of find wind, in essence, dealing with the consequence of transformation and trying to understand how transformation plays into this idea of love. Wind starts to transform into water and understands that fire actually exists in the core of the earth and actually transforms the land. And not just that him as water also impacts that. So trying to understand how pain and purpose start to influence your understanding of love, and also that navigation of it as well.
And by doing so, you shift from poetry towards a more narrative prose. Could you tell us a little bit of why you decided to tell different parts of the story in certain ways?
Yeah, I mean, like I'll read this section right here. I think I started to want to put this abstract feelings and these elements into more specific context so individuals could connect to it. I think that first book was really full expression, trying to break out the boundaries. But now I think in essence, I was trying to, in essence, have readers come back to earth from this kind of abstract world. And so here's an excerpt from the Earth's Song of Sun and Water, where there's different what I call water monologues, where water starts to reflect on his experience. And so he says, "She seems to confine me to a state of being that is beyond my control. My cold soul requires protection through a solid that is stable, but the sun spreads my molecules and tortures me as I travel through the air. I even get a brief glance of the wind before condensing into a cloud, but I've learned that my state doesn't stay whole for long. I'm enslaved by a false fire that constantly changes the state of my soul. My liquid being is most free, but never clear on how long it will be before I am asked to visit the sky and move further away from the earth's core where the fire burns. When I'm the ocean, I'm able to feel her through my depth and speak to her through my waves. She hears me even though I don't know if she is there. It is said that the fire comes not from the sun, but from the core of the earth. It is said that the fire can exist in liquid form, mirroring the fluidity of my watery existence. But I surrender as the sun rises again." And so at this point, you see that, water has difficulty understanding its role with the sun and how the sun, in essence, transforms into rain, to clouds, to various forms within the water cycle, which in essence becomes a duty, you know what I mean? And so now water starts to understand that duty aspect, that commitment aspect of love that you have to go through that may bring pain and sometimes confusion.
Yeah, no, this definitely felt like reading these excerpts, it felt like a conversation with myself, and it allows the readers to just sit down, take time to reflect on their grief and memories that shaped them and to who they are. And just by reading this, it feels like we're getting the train of thought that these characters are feeling through these different relationships. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, and then when I moved to the next book, which was Elemental Allegories and Emotional Landscapes, I actually put it in an actual story context. So now instead of having wind exist as water, now wind as water exists as an actual person, Akoben Moon, where you put this actual feeling, this actual navigation of love within a human context. And so this is where, that individual has to confront memory, has to confront grief, the complexity of just that human experience and how individuals go through healing. And so that's where I started to think about how would this individual kind of go through these different stages of healing. And so I organized it around 3 different parables: the parable of the knower, which is narrated by his mother, the parable of the lower, which is narrated by a friend of his, and then the parable of a grower, which is narrated by him himself. So really trying to expand these ideas to really live in certain individuals.
Yes. So you mentioned the character Akuben, and I was just wondering, does the return to delight represent a sort of reunion between the wind and fire?
I don't know if it's necessarily a reunion. I mean, Akoben, is going through, a lot, and I also read a short excerpt here from that book. I won't read this whole thing, but just gives you a sense of Akoben and some of the experiences that he's gone through, that's hopefully mirroring how you navigate love, not just love in an intimate sense, but love as it relates to your family, your mother, those individuals. And so, like I said, this particular one is narrated by his mother, which is named Mama Aya. And so it says, "In the stillness of early morning, as the dew kissed the soil and whispered to the roots below, I, Anita Moon, called Mama Aya, dug my fingers into the garden of my youth. The clay of Washington, D.C. had changed little since I was a girl, though the streets had filled with more sirens and fewer children chasing lightning bugs. Behind my small home in the sanctuary of green things sat my son, Akoben Moon, a man now 50 years aged and yet returned to the simplicity of a child, silent, watchful, unknowing of the world around him. He sat in his wheelchair, skin taut from hospital days, eyes veiled in what enable haze where memory once bloomed. My son, I said, not expecting a reply, for silence had become our language. You remember the soil because you were born of it. You remember me because I am your seed. But do you remember your name, the rhythm of your joy, the anguish you once buried deep like a bulb waiting for spring? He did not speak, but the way he watched me kneel by the tomato vine told me his soul still listened. You were a knower once, I said, as I pinched the browning leaf from the vine and let it fall. You knew the dance of chlorophyll and light. You could taste the difference between loam and silt with your tongue and diagnose a plant's ailment like a herbal prophet. But you didn't learn the soil within. You did not till the field of your emotion. And so, my child, the garden within you grew wild. Your neurons, the seedlings of thought, were left unattended. No hands pulled the lies out of by the roots. No light was cast to see that truth needing watering. And so as you see, like there's more narration here, still trying to use that poetic metaphor of the garden being this internal element of yourself that you have to be able to navigate. But once again, just allowing them to kind of see that expansion. But going back to what you mentioned as it relates to Delight, there's a character in their name Delight Ketcherman, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so it's an old college sweetheart that ends up coming back and seeing Akobin after 30 years, whatnot, and helping him during his coma. And so when they end up getting back together, there's a poem that's in there that's called "Beyond the Consciousness of Those Who Interact with Us," which I'll read. So it says, "We travel to a place far beyond the consciousness of those who interact with us. Dimensions merge and the light becomes central in the understanding of intentions and actions. In this land of light, we drink from a neon river that brightens the soul to become greater than our earthly selves. We radiate in union, only to become one with a single glance that speaks the truth of our youth, what has been done and what will become. Mountains of mystery manifest in curiosities that confuses the careful caress of the air that allows the breath of light. Gravity becomes irrelevant and transformation into a higher being where love and peace are rooted in a tree of union that grows like the natural budding of all seeds. The union of souls sends out a signal that surrenders all earthly possessions and possesses the patience to participate but anticipate the reciprocity of pure love in a place far beyond the consciousness of those who interact with us. Beyond the physical interaction of two souls, distance seems to deny the force of gravity that exists between us, but the attraction is still there. We roam around our space robotically, but moments of actuality tend to hit us where we acknowledge each other's infinity. Eternity is the only clock that exists in our interactions, thus making each moment a building block for a reality that may happen. Sometimes only a second, but pockets of forever dominate so that the energy lives in me beyond the physical interaction of two souls. In certain moments, the building blocks completes a temple of thought where we live in a pyramid maze of more confusion that brings a level of mystery, excitement, and suspense. I move in this maze, hoping to find you at the end, where you are confirming our connection and overstanding of a reality far beyond the physical interaction of two souls.
And this mystery you mentioned multiple times throughout the poem, I think that is a good reflection that we don't always get that perfect closure that we are sometimes seeking. And sometimes we are just left with the limited information we do have, and we still have to learn to push forward and carry on about our day, even if it's complicated. I have one final question for you. What do you hope the people here today take from these series tonight?
I guess, just inspiration, what I mean? I'm always big on individuals, just being able to tap into that creative element. That's a part of me that I've been trying to tap in on for a very long time. And it kind of goes with that final book, which is your orientation. You know what I mean? How you orient yourself within a time and space and how you keep that inner calibration. That tension of your orientation sometimes shifts. And as you go through emotion and try to understand that one stillness, you start to understand that, becoming is a slow process and it's not immediate. And so in this, in the final book in the series, Momentary Experiences and Understanding, I go more purely into this straight poetry. So you might not get a lot, a lot of narrative, but I also give a lot of personal commentary about each poem as well. So one of the poems that I'm gonna read from this book is called An Experience. And it's the first poem in the actual book. So it says, "Let me be your experience, familiar and unique. Allow me to activate the crevice of your consciousness where memories meet concrete feelings, where the abstraction of your mind becomes the colors of light among vibrations and elevates the meaning of living in an eternal state of being where souls transform and transfigure into transdimensional dualities in rhythm, effortless, endless. Can I be your experience? The one that lives in the soil of your inner space, where flora flourish into beliefs watered by hope, cultivated by the air that breathed life into our moment. Our experience is bigger than our grasp. We become the passage of light into a realm where we become the flow of existence, the movement of the universal cycles of connection, inspection, and detection. That dance of our molecular marbles with the melodies of our interstellar song that sings the sadness and the sophistication of intellectual integration internally, intensely. When I become your experience, we become the possibility of poetry, the psychology of our separate subconscious souls sent to see signs of subtle supernovas among situated stars that sigh and sit among the blackness of the scenery, significant only to your magnificence that amplifies the intimacy of our experience. An experience that is fleeting, informally, in a fixed infatuation of facts and fiction, feelings and friction, desperately dying, relying on diction, decoding inscriptions and encoding descriptions of an experience active, proactive, with no restrictions. Boundaries are fluid, water is wet. Let me be the experience you get.
Wow, that was beautiful. Well, that is all the questions I have for you today. It was truly a transformative conversation that we had tonight. And I hope all of you guys had something to take home with you, a piece of this conversation that we.
You want to see if there's any questions from the audience?
Yes. Are there any questions?
Mhm.
Good evening. So I know that some of your background is science, and I noticed that you used elements. So could you speak to, um, you know, maybe the inspiration behind that, or where science kind of um, works within the text?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. I was a former science teacher. I hated science growing up. And so I actually started teaching science because George Washington was giving, free master's degrees in middle school science. I was like, oh, okay, I might be able to use it. But then I started to develop a love for science, particularly earth science. And I, fell in love with teaching about the water cycle. And I started to think about how different natural and very authentic feelings for me manifest itself in the earth in different ways, particularly elements, earth, wind, and fire. And I started to think about how these elements could, in essence, start to manifest itself, and how we could use the details of the actual science to kind of describe the complexity of abstract feelings and emotions. So whether it's this idea of water going into a solid, what does that mean when your emotions are solid or secluded or condensed? And when that heat is applied and you have expansion of those molecules, what does that represent within a relationship? So I started to think about how these different aspects started to describe feelings that I wasn't able to describe with regular words.
Thank you. So in addition to the words and the written prose, a striking feature of your books is the artwork. Can you speak to your process for developing that artwork and its significance in contrast to the written word?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I was noticing as I was, doing some of this work is like kind of the limited images of particularly Black people that we have when it comes to love. And so one of the elements that I really wanted to do was kind of depict an idea of Black love in a variety of different ways. So I started experimenting with AI, and it's like, wow, they were having really different. I was really having challenges with like creating Black images, and so I started to write even more and started to study how to create prompts that would even embody a variety of different individuals. And so I started combining some of the stuff that I learned with Canva, as well as using several different AI tools to kind of get these different images to play in. And so sometimes I would put in different backdrops and then put the image on there. Sometimes I would start with a backdrop image and then start to put different characters in there. But it's sometimes very free flowing, almost collagey, as you go about it. But ultimately, you're hoping for the best, because ultimately, like, the computer can pop out anything. And so sometimes it's a matter of like altering the language or putting more details, and you'll be surprised the more information. If you put a whole paragraph in, they'll give you a good amount of it. And so part of the images is about the writing too. There's a lot of detailed writing in the prompts to try to get the lotus flower right there, and making sure that they have certain colors in the actual dress. All those are detailed and curated throughout the images.
I had a question about the layout of the book. The books, like with the text messages and the pager. How did that go about? I guess just structuring it, because every page is very different.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want it to look like a regular book, you know what I mean? But I didn't want to look like a messy magazine at the same time, you know what I mean? So I almost had this aesthetic, preconceived notion that I had to break out of. But when I started to think about how, I guess it was really influenced. A lot of movies, if you realize nowadays, are putting like text message images up when they're doing that. I think that was one of the elements that kind of pushed me to like, well, how would that look like in a book format? You know what I mean? If I started to, display some of those dialogues there. So that was really trying to, think about how I could possibly pull in a different audience, such as, Camille's group and my daughter's generation of Gen Z, who might be interested in and maybe willing to, open themselves up to this type of literature. Any other questions?
Hi, I'm interested in hearing about your process of actually writing the poetry. Has it changed from book to book, or is your process still remain the same depending on if you're writing for an academic setting versus for your own poetry?
Wow, that's a really great question. A lot of this stuff has come recently. You know what I mean? I think this first book has been building up. I've been writing little by little, and then I finally just kind of put it all together. But after I wrote that one, I started to see patterns. I studied it like a researcher. Like, okay, what do I see here? You know what I mean? Oh, maybe I could build on Wind and Fire. What would be the next story? And that's where I came up with Sun and Water. But when I started to get into the other works, a lot of it was being inspired by what was going on in life. You know what I mean? Movies that I was watching, people I was interacting with, understanding that love exists in a variety of different ways, not just within an intimate relationship, but through friendships, with parents, with students. You know what I mean? Like, we get really, really close to our students as teachers, as you know, and sometimes obviously we got to be careful, but we do love our students. And so how do we navigate that push and pull when some of them feel like fire and you are, kind of in essence wind? So all of these books, definitely were done in a different way. And I think that ultimately it almost felt like a brain dump of a lot of emotions that had been building up. So I'm starting to kind of study that process now to see how, it would now influence the next set of books. But yeah, it wasn't really as structured as I might do my research, where I am, very much, clear about how I go about the stages of the authors, of the articles, things of that nature. It's a little bit different. This was more free flowing in essence.
Any more questions?
Well, I had a couple of other poems that I wanted to, well, at least one more poem that I wanted to read to you all. And hopefully, like I said, it just leaves us with an idea of what we can do to stay inspired. You know what I mean? And sometimes inspiration can be hard to sustain. And so this poem, I think embodies how certain things and certain people can be muses for you. You know what I mean? And sometimes those muses can also be confusing as it relates to trying to interpret it. So I'm going to read this last poem, which is called An Amused Muse. So it says, is a muse something you choose? Is it a muse when the idea you find is the idea you lose? Does it accuse when accuracy is absent from the muse? Is a muse always a muse, or does it lose its mystery when time passes experience and moments become history? Will a muse still catalyze when self-denial exists? Will a muse still analyze when distance persists? I cruise with the muse and create light out of words. I move with the muse even if words are not heard. I groove with the muse suspended in time. Diction and fiction become one with the divine. The purity of expression, the innocence of intention. A muse I choose not to lose so we can resume our ascension. So keep your muses out there in your life. You know what I mean? Stay inspired. They can come in a variety of different ways, whether it's people, things, movies, books. But hopefully as, creatives, we tap into that natural being from us and utilize that in the work that we do. So yeah, Camille, I guess these are the 4 different books. You can see them up here. I think that, they're easy, nice little table, coffee table books that you can put on there so folks can kind of flip through as they come visit. But I definitely appreciate the support. This is a passion project. The group of students that are here actually encourage students at American University to do passion projects. And so they actually inspired me to say, you know what, let me do my own passion project and actually move forward with this and utilize those connections. So I'm really, really happy to have my American University students here supporting them. And like I said, these are students that don't even take my classes. So that's how powerful it is to have them here to support me and to come here and, be in front of folks and be recorded. Camille, I really appreciate it. And as y'all know, one of the I mentioned before, one of the big poets that really influenced me was a poet, Nikki Giovanni. And so I wanted to kind of end this talk with a poem from Nikki Giovanni called Resignation that Camille will read.
I love you because the earth turns round the sun, because the north wind blows north sometimes, because the Pope is Catholic and most rabbis Jewish, because the winters flow into springs and the air clears after a storm, because only my love for you, despite the charms of gravity, keeps me from falling off this earth into another dimension. I love you because it is the natural order of things. I love you like it's the habit I picked up in college of sleeping through my lectures or saying I'm sorry when I get stopped for speeding, because I drink a glass of water in the morning and chain smoke cigarettes all through the day, because I take my coffee black and my milk with chocolate, because I keep my feet warm through though my life a mess. I love you because I don't want it any other way. I am helpless in my love for you. It makes me so happy to hear you call my name. I am amazed you can resist locking me in an echo chamber where your voice reverberates through the 4 walls, sending me into a spasmodic ecstasy. I love you because it's been so good for so long that if I didn't love you, I'd have to be born again. And that is not a theological statement. I am pitiful in my love for you. The Dells tells me love, or tell me love. It's so simple. The thought, though, of you sends indescribably delicious. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know. Multitudinous thrills throughout in my body. I love you because no two snowflakes are alike, and it is possible if you stand tippy-toe to walk between the raindrops. I love you because I am afraid of the dark and I can't sleep in the light because I rub my eyes when I wake up in the morning and to find you there. Because you with all your magic powers were determined that I should love you. Because there was nothing for you but that I would love you. I love you because you made me want to love you more than I love my privacy, my freedom, my commitments and responsibilities. I love you because I changed my life to love you. Because you saw me one Friday afternoon and decided that I would love you. I love you. I love you. I love you.
Thanks, Camille. Thank you all so much for coming. Much love, and I appreciate all y'all support.
Thank you. Thank you. I was thinking the same thing as soon as I saw you walk in. No, and I love it. I love the outfit. Yeah, I agree.